All right.
Which means everybody gets to press that little OK button. Looks like we have our first question. Daniel, if you want to uncork and ask your question, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I can just answer it right there. So what was in chat was, seems like the perfSONAR device does not support 1 gig SFPs. Can we confirm? There's nothing, as far as I know, that we explicitly don't support. So if you're having a specific problem, I mean, feel free to let us know what it is, and maybe we can help you out with it. But for us, a network interface is a network interface, and as long as it works, then we can work with it. Oh, here's another good one. IPv6, and this is going to be like the speed round, I think.
Yep.
IPv6 and multiple IPs per interface. Any chance of getting it to work with perfSONAR? perfSONAR.
So
I'm reading ahead. Unfortunately, I think I'll stick to the.
yeah.
Stick to these in order. You want to take the IPv6?
Yeah, I was gonna say. So again, I don't know if you know something, Mark, but maybe Adam too, if you want to speak about. I'm not quite sure again what's not supported there. I don't know that I've ever tried multiple IPs in the same address family on an interface to know one way or the other, but basically we add a source and destination to the test, right? And it tries its best and trust the Linux kernel to some degree to do what it's supposed to. I know when you have multiple interfaces, we have like a script, because even though when you set the source address, it doesn't necessarily mean that the OS is going to actually respect that source address. So we do provide a script within the toolkit that actually is essentially does like source routing that says, if you see this source address in the header, send it out the interface with that address, which sounds silly, but it's actually something you have to do to get that to work. And it's been that way for a really long time.
Yeah, because the kernel's famous for hijacking those. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's a slightly different, I maybe a little off course to the question. So yeah, so I don't know, Adam, specifically, is there something you've seen with multiple IPs on the same interface that hasn't seemed to work?
Oh, Andy, we should probably make sure that people can unmute themselves.
Oh,
I don't know if that's a.
I would assume that they can, but that's a great.
Yeah, I think the default on this is not. Maybe if somebody wants to just try unmuting and.
Yeah, or you can.
Okay, Brian James says he can unmute, so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for guinea pigging that for us, because when Jason runs this, he usually keeps a pretty tight ship. So lots of people pouring into the waiting room here. But yeah, in general, okay, I saw a little follow up there. So the IPv6 problem is the random address that is used for security. That is actually a new one on me. I guess, Adam, if you're asking about the self-assigned addresses that get put on those interfaces, that's kind of a function of what your OS does, rather than perfSONAR specifically. If you want to uncork maybe and let us know if that answers your question or not, and if not, then we'll move on. Okay, so the next question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. So the next question was about perfSONAR 5 Docker install. So for reference, currently our Docker, our kind of primary Docker offerings for the perfSONAR releases are the perfSONAR, what's called the perfSONAR test point. So basically you get pscheduler and all the tools that you need to essentially run the test, but there's no like archive, and none of the UIs are in the Docker container. It's just kind of everything you need to run the tests. And then the idea is you will ship the results out elsewhere. So for 5.1, we are planning to make some changes to that Docker container. So right now it's based on CentOS 7, the one that we ship. And so obviously we're trying to move out of CentOS 7 everywhere, because that goes end of life in a few months. So we'll actually be moving that. The plan is Ubuntu 22. because we'll be adding Ubuntu 22 packages in 5.1, and we've started doing some preliminary testing on that just to kind of get away from the Red Hat stuff, since there seems to be lots of moving targets there. So the Docker image will be based on Ubuntu 22. You can still run it on whatever host OS, right? That's the benefit of Docker. We've been talking back and forth a little bit if we wanted to add some new images, like in terms of the archive or individual components. I think right now, at least when 5.1 comes out, we don't have any specific plans to add more, but that could change. Honestly, they're not too difficult for us to build. It's mostly just documentation and supporting it and setting people's expectations how they work. Because yeah, I'm assuming if we're going to support the Docker installs, are we going to support like full toolkit or like archives and things like that instead of just the test point? So the immediate answer is not with 5.1, but I would expect we're going to be expanding that in the future. So hopefully that's kind of answers the question.
Yeah, and some of this too, I mean, we in a lot of ways we're sort of driven by what the people who use this ask us for. So previously there hasn't been a great deal of demand for that. And as I recall, I think in earlier versions there were a couple of cans of worms that we didn't want to open. So we didn't. Let's see, let me scroll down some more here.
Yeah, so there was one about tuning on 8.9 in Ubuntu and having trouble kind of getting those to break 15 gig speeds when previously on CentOS 7 they could get greater than 40 gig. So I know that I saw there was the answer there that pointed you at faster data, which is what I would say as well. I don't know off the top of my head of any specific issues, but I do know I know, Mark, you guys went through this as well. I know on ESNet we went through it. The 100G tuning is still a little bit more art than science. I know probably a lot of what both of us went through has made its way to faster data since then. But it can take quite a bit of, it can still take a little work to get the different hardware and NICs and things working the way you need to. I know too, for a lot of people, maybe somewhat coming out of this window, but I know one challenge we had is we started building out our 100 gig test bed right around COVID time. So we had a box spec that we had ordered or that we had tested and were comfortable with and ordered it, and then COVID happened and supply chains got messed up. And I know a lot of people in this boat, you basically just take what you can get at that point and figure it out later, or that's the mode we were in. So yeah, so it can be challenging. I don't know any, just magical bullets that'll probably fix the issue for you. Yeah, but faster data is a great resource for that. And honestly, if you find anything too, it's always good to kick that information back because it's likely other people are running into the same issues. So
yeah, so we're running Internet 2 is running we're running Alma 9, and we run because we have multiple interfaces, we run the containers. Most of the tuning is at the host level, and then we just take the interfaces, bind them straight into the containers. I forget, in the lab we did pretty well with it, with the tuning that we had, but I think as Andy pointed out, there is certainly there's sort of a lot of hardware variability just depending on whose card you have and the drivers and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but it sort of is the answer because there's a lot of variables there. But we were able to get, before we bought all 50 of the machines that we put in our POPs, we had 2 of them that we bought and we put them in the lab with a piece of fiber between them, and we were getting not single stream obviously, but we were able to get 93 plus gigabits per second out of them pretty regularly. So that's about all I can add to that.
all right, and then kind of moving on to the next issue or the next question. I thought it was going to stand up there. Yes, moving on to the next question. With the move away to CentOS to distros that use Chrony by default, will perfSONAR leave time to sync up to the OS, time sync up to the OS entirely, or will this be added back to the web UI? So to give people context here, if you install the non-CentOS 7 versions of the toolkit, There used to be a tab if you logged into the toolkit UI that allowed you to mess with NTP settings. On the newer OSs, when you install it, that tab does not exist anymore, and that is intentional. A big part is because of the move to Cronny, right? That page doesn't, as written, was not compatible with it. Also, I think just this was kind of an opportunity for us. There is not plans to add that page back. I don't think any of us are super comfortable with the web UI touching system files and things like that. I know that's something we've done for a long time, and in the past, just as perfSONAR has grown and has been in the spotlight and has had to deal with CVEs over the years and stuff like that, we've kind of tried to tighten things up a little bit. The other challenge we have there too is we've had lots of trouble over the years keeping or having a good reference fleet of NTP servers out in the world. Basically different institutions provide them, but they'd come and go over time, and it was really challenging to kind of keep that list up to date and useful. One thing we will be looking at, this will be post 5.1, but kind of probably more in the 5.2 timeframe and maybe even a little bit beyond, is there are some plans to look a little bit closer at things like PTP and supporting that as well, just because that situation's gotten a lot better in the past few years. That's a lot easier to deploy and things like that. So there's a few different levels to that. Some will just be, using PTP reference clocks, right? What does that do to OAMP results and things like that? All the way up to, are there some things like, could we actually write some tools that actually use some of those hardware timestamps more directly and things like that. So that's still very much an exploratory task. So basically that's what we have on the roadmap, is to explore that more. So I don't know exactly what that will turn into, but that is an area we're looking at as well. So.
Hey, thank you. I unmuted if you don't mind, because that's exactly where I was leading. Is there's not going to be much context to this, but the tests I've been running that you've been helping me with on the data collection is a PTP test. And I've got a whole bunch of data collected and lessons learned and things like that. And hopefully I'll be writing that up and submitting it as a proposal, but please let's keep in touch about that, because I found some really, really good results with PTP.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great for you to share those. And yeah, I'd love to see those. So
Yeah, thanks.
And are you just using that to discipline your system clock, or are you doing other things with it?
Right now it's purely the system clock. So
Okay.
without going too far astray, I'm using Time Master to launch Cronny, and then it inserts a shared memory driver or shared memory reference clock. A lot of this is new to me, so I may be I may not be getting things exactly right. But then essentially that shared memory clock shows up as a source in Cronny, and then that's it. Like once every 8 seconds, it polls that it's shared memory clock, which is disciplined off the NIC, the clock on the NIC, which is PTP disciplined. I think that's the best way to describe it. And I'll give you a little bit of a preview, and that is even using a single NTP server for two machines that were on the same router, I got negative latencies with the one-way measurement tests, but with PTP, I get 0.
Oh, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds
yeah.
great.
So, yeah, as I figure this stuff out, I'll be sharing results, and yeah, it looks pretty promising. The complication part is probably not in the OS; it's in the PTP distribution design.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, so that's interesting. So I take it the two machines that you were testing with were topologically pretty close.
Yes, and I don't know if we want to start this on the mailing list, but I can show you that I can send you the topology and some initial tests. And I'm starting again probably next week. I'm going to do another round of tests, because I think I found a better way to graph the Cronny results. If that works, then it'll at least it'll be easier to correlate what's going on with the clock performance and the one-way measurement performance.
Well, yeah, that's good to know, because there are other places that are interested in PTP as well. And I've had some kind of not passing interest, but I've had a kind of little side interest in perhaps using PTP's packet tagging just to do latency measurement that way and not depend on the system clocks at all.
Ah, cool. Cool.
Yeah, so that's another one of those things that's on the back burner until what's on the front burner is finally evaporated.
Nice.
So
Yeah, in particular, some of our kind of collaborators at JISC and at Jayant are super interested in it, and obviously I don't think any of them are on this call because it's like Friday evening there, so I don't know that they want to spend their Friday evening with Mark and I. So
Who wouldn't?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
know.
thanks.
I don't know. I think our wives are okay with it. All right. So I guess on to the next one. So this is from Joshua. This is more of a personal question. Is there a preferred deployment method that we use ourselves? So the answer, I'm going to give you a non-answer here, and then I'll give you a little bit more of an answer. The non-answer is we prefer anything that we support, just because, you know, there's lots of different ways to skin this cat. So that's kind of the reason that there are different ways to install it. I can tell you, for example, like Internet 2's production deployment is a bunch of Docker containers, because we have these machines that have lots of interfaces on them. And instead of trying to have, and some of them we don't want them accessible from everywhere. So on some of these, we basically have up to 4 Docker containers that are 4 basically discrete perfSONAR nodes, and we just use them. We treat them like they're separate machines, because as far as everybody else is concerned, that's where they are. There is a case for, the bare metal style installation. If you're doing it on a VM or something like that, that obviously makes a lot more sense, because VMs are kind of disposable. So I mean, really, it's really a case of evaluate your situation, figure out which tool is the right one for the job, and use it.
Yep, I think that's a good summary. Is basically any of the things that we support on the list, I think, are good. You just have to kind of take your own personal considerations and your organization's considerations into effect, because I know some people have preferred OSs and stuff like that.
I didn't
of all those things if you can.
I didn't address Alma versus Rocky, which was in there. My experience with that, because when we started doing ports of pscheduler, which is sort of like the hardest part of the system, I think, to port. Maybe I'm a little biased because I wrote it, but my experience is that Alma and Rocky are pretty much bug compatible with each other. And I did a small amount of testing with actual Red Hat Enterprise, and all 3 of them seem to be bug compatible. I think one of the good things that came out of all of the Red Hat induced chaos of the last few years is that Alma and Rocky sort of reset all of the incompatibilities that had crept into CentOS over the years, and are now a lot better aligned with Enterprise. I don't know how that's going to go in the future, because so much stuff is up in the air. That's, I think, while we're sort of why, a lot of things like the container, the Docker containers, we're starting to shift that over to something Debian derived, because that's a little more stable.
I guess I should mention too, if you are in the Red Hat camp, I do think we have some preferences there, obviously. So whether it's Rocky or Alma, we kind of, I think, suggest or prefer, however you want to frame it, you go to 9. Obviously 7 is almost out the door, will not be supported at all in 5.1. 8 is also kind of in a weird spot. There are certain distributions that people run that have extended life support, but basically it's supposed to basically go out of support about the same time as 7 this summer. So if you are in the Red Hat camp, we really kind of try to push people towards 9. We also just noticed too, from debugging and helping people, that there tends to be less issues on 9. Now, whether that's because 9 is just a fresh start, they don't have some CentOS 7 host that they've had around for a zillion years. It's got all a bunch of cruft on it, or something else. Just it seems to be an overall better experience for people too doing that.
Yeah, and there may be something 8 related happening in 5.1, but we haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah, we have some. I mean, just to be transparent on that, there's some pretty big deployments that have 8. That some of the member organizations that help develop perfSONAR have to support. So there's a kind of a vested interest there. It sounds like maybe to keep 8 alive. So yeah, probably there will be some stuff for 8 and 5.1. So
yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. Let's see what else we have here. Let's see. Will 5.1 be supported on Debian 11 and 12 or just 12? I actually have to look at my note on that because
so it's actually both.
Yeah.
It's 11 and 12. So basically we'll be adding Debian 11 and 12 and Ubuntu 22 finally. So I know we're kind of behind the 8 ball on a lot of those, but all of those will be added.
yeah. And Debian 10 and 18 are going away. Or Debian 10 and Ubuntu 18, excuse me.
Yeah, we won't be releasing packages for those. So
yep. So get yourselves upgraded if you can. Yeah, it's I think, and we've been in some ways we've been a little tardy getting support for the newer OSs out. And some of the work that we've done internally over the last couple of years will make that easier for us. So we shouldn't be as behind as we were in the future.
So I see Andrew posted a question. As we highlighted, we did make a change in 5.08. We noticed on Rocky 9 that basically for years now, like as long as I can remember on the perfSONAR project, we've disabled Network Manager by default. It seems to basically be tied in a lot more closely to the networking stack essentially and the EL9 variants. So we basically just don't disable it now on EL9. If you decide to disable it yourself, we won't, nothing will override that. But so that's one change we made. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Andrew, because I think sometimes that stuff is buried in the release notes, but it was definitely giving people problems having that disabled. And then your question on SE Linux and problems with web UI. So we actually have an issue open on this. It's actually even assigned to me to kind of take a closer look at that. It's somewhat of a moving target in that I can't recreate it in 100% of the cases. But definitely have had others report that as well. I've even got audit logs from them. Was hoping to sneak something into 5.08 related to that. But there was a couple things in the audit.log I wasn't comfortable just without taking a closer look, opening it up or maybe making some changes, so we don't need to. But I think we are I think we're on a path to having that. I'm guessing we'll do a 5.09 at some point in the next few weeks, just because we always do. It seems like every few weeks we have a release, and 5.1 is far enough away. So I hope that we probably have something in 5.09 that fixes that for anyone that's running into it. So again, I can't run. I actually have trouble recreating it in my test environment, which is unfortunate. But multiple people are seeing it. So yeah, hopefully we'll figure out what's going on there. So.
All right. Yeah, we just had another question from Alvaro about what is the status of RFC 9533 support, which is extensions for basically OAMP and TWAMP for measuring link aggregation groups. The answer to that question is we have done no work on that, and this is actually I was actually not even aware that had been written. So we will have to. I will take a note to have a look at that. Yeah, link aggregation is always fun. I know that's come up internally at Internet 2 a few times in the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, if that's stuff that's easy to support, I mean, it's certainly if it's easy to support in terms of what the tools make available, then it should be fairly easy for us to add it to perfSONAR as well. So usually for most of these things, and this is true for changes to existing tools and writing new ones, most of the ideas that we get for doing these things come from, people have tools that they're using out in the world that are maybe not connected to perfSONAR. And, what we need to get probably 75% of the way there is just somebody who knows the tools, knows how to use them, and can work with us on getting them integrated. So I'll make a note to give that RFC a read and see what's available for it, because that does seem like a useful tool.
I always find our OAMP RFCs a little bit interesting, especially when they aren't brought to our attention. Like I know TWAMP is pretty widespread, but we're one of the only OAMP implementations I know about. So Now maybe they have a merge or pull request or something I'm not aware of, but that's always interesting too. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely worth taking a look and seeing what's in there. So.
Okay, that gets us to the bottom. Let me just roll back here and see if there's anything that see if there's anything we missed. Nope, lots of good comments and so forth. Okay, if anybody else has anything they want to talk about deployment or just something that's kind of sticking in your craw, feel free to either drop something in chat or unmute. So and have a few 4-letter words with us if you need to.
Well, I do appreciate all the questions so far, and
yeah. I mean, and this is I mean, like I said, we're still sort of kind of feeling our way around this format. So you know, I know there were a couple of other people who I thought might come with some questions. But we'll see how else it goes. Trying to think if there's anything else we can talk about 5.1 that hasn't been
oh, did you disconnect or was that me? So
nope, wasn't me.
oh, okay, for a minute.
Yeah. Oh, Phil asked, did we release the dash?
Oh.
Phil, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so basically there's a newer version of iPerf3 out that supports threading, which basically allows you to drive it a lot harder. So we had the current 5.0.8 or 5.0.8, yeah, doesn't have that version of iPerf3 installed. We wanted to kind of test it a little bit more with pscheduler just to be safe. We are planning to include that in 5.1. There are no major changes in it that should affect the pscheduler interaction, kind of from our cursory glance at it, but we try to be careful about those things. So, so yeah, if you install perfSONAR today, you do not get the threaded iPerf. You still get the non-threaded version, but that will definitely be coming. And I know something people are anxious about. Yeah, so.
And you said that ESNet's been experimenting with that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Too, so
yeah, we were just debugging something last week. And basically had 7 hosts on our network in the Chicago area, and then Fermilab was actually running it, and we're able to fill up quite a bit of their 400 gig lag that we were just talking about as well, which was kind of cool to see. So
yeah, I mean, we've had it. I mean, it's been in the build since it's not the production build, but it's been in the development build since it was released. So I mean, it works, it does its job. I haven't been pushing it real hard because I assume that ESNet has done that already and found the problems in it before they released it. But functionally it seems about the same. I haven't had any real weirdness with it. Let's see. We had a question from Brian about how the I2 containerization effort is going. I presume, and you can feel free to unmute and set me in the right direction if I'm wrong here. I presume you're asking about how our containerized deployment of perfSONAR is going. The answer is it's going. It's all there. It has so far not given us a great deal of trouble. It's kind of worked as advertised. We've had some interesting, it's actually funny because I just gave a talk about this the other day for the Europeans, but the thing that has given us more difficulties has been some of the things that we use to deploy it. So I mean, we can deploy it without problem. The nodes work just fine. What we do with them in a nutshell is we use the Mac VLAN driver that's available in Podman and Docker to take an outside interface and bind it straight into the container. And that works just fine. I think, as I said earlier, that was what we did. That's what we did in the lab before we bought all the machinery. We did some comparisons of bare metal versus Mac VLAN, and we didn't really find any measurable difference in how they performed. But the biggest thing that we've actually run into are things like we've had difficulties with Ansible and Salt in getting them to deploy and maintain themselves properly, largely because in Ansible's case, we discovered, and I suspect that this probably has something to do with our network configuration. So what we do for Ansible is we create a network with, we tell it Mac VLAN and we set it up the way we need it to, and then we create a container that has that network bound into it. What we discovered was that every time we ran Ansible, its concept of whether or not the network had changed there's something wrong with that, basically, and it recreates the network every time, and the side effect of that is that the container that's using it has to get torn down and rebuilt as well, which is not something we want every time we run Ansible. Salt does not have that problem, and Salt is actually what we use primarily for these deployments. Some of what we deploy on those systems is kind of done. We had to do some things with shell scripts by hand just to make them work. And some of that stuff is being shifted over to Salt, so it's properly maintained. But Salt has an interesting problem. This is going to be a little bit of a long answer. So Docker used to have this problem where it didn't understand IPv4/31s, which we use pretty extensively ourselves for point-to-point connections. So that got fixed. We ran a patch version of it in-house for probably a good 9-10 months before we switched over to Podman. Podman understands it, but its HTTP API does not. So I have to go through and find the problem in that and correct it, like we did for Docker a few years ago. But other than that, I mean, once the network part is up and once the container's up, they work just fine. So I hope that answers or more than answers your questions. Let's see.
Yeah, so there's another question about salt formulas. If anybody has any, I know I personally don't. So like on the Ansible side of the house, we have some Ansible playbooks that are in our repos, and I think on docs.perfSONAR.net there's some pointers to those, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I don't know if anybody has any salt formulas they can share. That's definitely not something we have kind of on the officially supported.
Yeah. We're not to the point where we have it working satisfactorily with Salt. Once we do, we'll probably share some of that and contribute it to the project. Something that's probably going to come out of some of the work that I've done for SciNet over the last couple of years will probably be a deployment toolkit. We're using Ansible on SciNet. We didn't run into the side effects of the 31 problem because we don't have 31s to deal with because we have enough IP space to do 30s for our point-to-point. So we kind of dodged that bullet. But yeah, once we get Salt working as we want it, we'll probably share that. And we actually also have some things that I could probably share out to from SciNet because we used Ansible to field it. But instead of doing like the straight bare metal install, which is what perfSONAR makes available, we were doing containers, which is a little different. Let's see. Okay, another question from Adam. Update was killed Mad Dash on Ubuntu.
So basically what's being done to help that from not happening again is we're getting rid of Mad Dash. At least in its current form.
Best solution ever.
Yeah, so yeah, so sorry, the question was over break there was an update on Ubuntu that was killing the Mad Dash service. I actually know there's been some issues too, like the WSCG Mad Dash instance too has some issues a lot of times when we do update. it needs to be restarted. So that code base is pretty old at this point. So, basically the big feature in 5.1 is a move to Grafana. So you're still going to be able to do the Mad Dash type stuff. It's just going to be encapsulated in Grafana. The way Mad Dash works today as well, so it's not just a display, there's also a backend that basically is just like essentially polling your archive all the time to fill in the green, red, and yellow. With Grafana, we can actually do like live checks, which is much nicer. Take some load off your archive. You get more recent results. You can adjust the time frame too, and kind of look in the past and things like that. So I think that'll end up being a lot better. Basically, it'll work very similar to the way I think most people use Mad Dash today. We have a PS config generator that we've written that instead of basically creating that giant maddash.yaml page, it'll talk to Grafana and create the grids for you in Grafana. And if I was more organized for this meeting, I'd pull up one of the testbed dashboards I had. But as things go, I just found it, and I've been messing with the system, so it doesn't have data right now, so it doesn't it doesn't look very good. So, but we do have a lot of that stuff working, and we're kind of just ironing out the last bits of problems. So that'll be part of the 5.1 beta when we get that out. So.
Yeah, the recent problems with that are kind of a perfSONAR tradition, which is that we usually get a lot of grief from whatever it is we're about to phase out just before we phase it out. So this is just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of par for the course for us, but we'll keep it working as long as we need to.
And so kind of on that note, Adam asked, will the Grafana cookbook be expanded? Yes. So obviously Grafana is going to become more of a central part of if you install a perfSONAR toolkit. One thing that we have coming this summer in June, that'll be at the TNC conference that Jant hosts. It's in France this year. We're actually planning to do a perfSONAR Grafana workshop where basically people will come, they'll have their laptops, and we'll kind of work through. Everybody will kind of get hands-on and creating perfSONAR dashboards. We ran through basically a early version of this at our last face-to-face perfSONAR developer meeting to kind of trial it out. I think it went really well, and I think it was helpful to a lot of developers as well to kind of go through that exercise. So we've got like material for that I think we'll probably also make its way online, because that's what we normally do with that type of stuff. So yeah, I expect a lot. We do plan to kind of expand a lot of that information, and we already have a cookbook started again that we've kind of just been testing internally for how to get all the new Grafana stuff set up as well. And again, it's kind of we're trying to do more in that format that I know people have liked in the past with like Mad Dash and things that just goes like straight through step by step. Run these commands on this machine. Instead of people having to scramble around and try and piece all that information together. So that's kind of our goal, is to have more stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and I also suspect that the history of this is probably going to match the history of the way graphs went, where the old graph stuff went, which is, we kind of started out with it and we added things to it and kind of fine-tuned it a little bit. So I'm sure probably people will give us ideas for, cool stuff that we can add to it that would be useful in the default package. But I mean, I guess the good thing about it is that, since it's all, since what comes out of the Grafana, the PS config Grafana agent is all JSON anyway, it should be fairly easy to merge things into it if you have custom things that you want to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, and we're really kind of hoping part of this move, like we even have a section right now on the toolkit dashboard that you get by default called kind of like My Dashboards, with the idea that people would create their own stuff and hopefully share it out if they find useful things, because I think that's one powerful thing that we don't have now that this will kind of buy us, is kind of that customizability. And yeah, people will have probably better ideas than we have, which is always good, and since it's open source, can contribute those back. So yeah, so pretty excited to see all of that stuff happen. I will say too, just a common question we get about the Grafana stuff is, so obviously in the toolkit, if you'd like to do yum install or sorry, it's not yum anymore, DNF install or apt-get install of the 5.1 toolkit, you'll get a new Grafana install, but a lot of people already have Grafana running at their institutions. We are working on instructions for how to like import this stuff into your
Andy froze up. Maybe I
Grafana
did.
deployment. So, oh, sorry. Did I break up there?
One of us did. It was either you or me, and I'm being told my internet connection is unstable. So
Okay.
it might have been me.
Yeah. So anyways, if it wasn't, yeah, basically the idea is you'll be able to also import a lot of our kind of out of the box dashboards into your own Grafana instance if that's kind of the way you want to run things is the hope. So
Yeah, I think also probably, and this is kind of my own personal preference for deployment. I like to keep the measurement points as lean as they possibly can. So, you know, for us, it's just the test point, and you know, anything that we collect, we send somebody someplace else for looking at it.
all right, well, see, while we're waiting, I can maybe actually show a little demo of the new toolkit UI if people want. A little off the cuff. I have that running. I don't have the Mad Dash piece looking nice, but I have just what you'll get when you install the toolkit. So maybe that'll inspire some more questions, or if you think of other things while I'm doing that, we can get that queue going. Does that sound good, Mark?
Sounds fine by me.
All right. So this is a little test instance I have running. So basically, if you just go to the main address, normally you'd get that old /toolkit page. You'll get this page now just to kind of prove that, and it forwards you here. And so this is all Grafana now. So we showed a lot of this at September TechX. Yeah, that was back in September. We've made a few edits to it since then. You'll see this particular host, I don't have any throughput tests running, so it's running just some OAMP and traceroute tests. So basically we've kind of we're trying to make it the main page a little more test centric. The old one was very like, what's running on this host centric, which used to be really useful back in the BWCTL and OAMP days. Like if you remember way back then, because people didn't run those things on the same box, but is less useful now. So basically we give some kind of just high level breakdowns and kind of a list of what types of tests we're running over time. And I've just got a couple tests running here on this instance with the OAMP data. So you can click through here and you'll get some of the graphs, but I actually think some of the more interesting stuff, we're also are collecting a lot more host information now. So you can kind of click on the host info here and get versions of that same info you had on the old main toolkit page about what servers are running, but you can actually see them over time. So like these boxes would be red if like the service died or things like that, and then it would go back green if it came back up, which can be helpful if things are flapping and things like that. Things actually look pretty good on this host right now, so everything's all green. Do the same thing for lookup service registration. I have that disabled on this host because it's a dev host, so that's all red, but can look at things like that. We've got some nice graphs of memory and CPU, network traffic, kind of just standard system host stats. We've got a bunch of metrics that come out of pScheduler that we've had for a while, but we've never really had the ability to kind of graph before out of the box. So I added some of that here, just about like kind of what state different runs are in, basically what the archiving queue looks like, things like that can be helpful with debugging. Same deal with PS config. So getting some stats out of that in terms of last time it ran, what are the meshes pointed at, is configure archives turned on, things like that. We're talking about NTP earlier, get some clock metrics and just like different tuning settings and things like that. So we actually basically the different applications we like pScheduler kind of long had the ability to kind of export things and basically Prometheus type format. And we've got node exporter on the boxes, and PS config we also instrumented. So we can collect all that. It all goes into OpenSearch, so we're not like adding another database on or anything like that. So it all goes into the local OpenSearch instance, and then we can create it in Grafana and do stuff like that. And I don't have the throughput tests on here, but the other thing that it would actually annotate these system graphs with is when iPerf ran, which is kind of cool to see. You can kind of see maybe little memory spikes or things like that when iPerf is running, if you zoom in far enough, just to kind of help associate. And the network traffic too is often where you see some interesting stuff there. So yeah, so that's just kind of a little preview of some of the stuff that's coming. I also mentioned too, I go back to, sorry. Demo here. No, I also mentioned too, we've kind of by default are thinking we'll have a section like this where like people can create their own dashboards. I'm not signed in, so I don't have the power to do that right now, but people can create their own dashboards and then customize stuff, and that's kind of baked in. So yeah, that's my quickie demo there. So.
Yeah, and this will take, we have some, there's kind of a whole, there's a whole bunch of kind of hand rolled code that we've had over the years that we're going to be able to jettison as a result of this, which is, you know, it's less it'll open up some of our cycles to do some other things as well. So you know, and people can, it's much more customizable than the old stuff ever was. So so we're hoping people like that. That's probably a better question for you, I think.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on just in terms of how many tests you're storing and things like that. Really, that's kind of been true for a while. I can't remember. I think our minimum requirements for the toolkit, did we bump them to 8 gig? I think we maybe
I
bumped
think
them
we may have, yeah.
full toolkit, not for a test point, obviously.
Yeah.
And things like that. So I mean, I think that's a decent minimum.
The question, by the way, was what's the current suggestion for memory for OpenSearch, in case nobody reading the chat. Yeah, I mean, you can, I think you can kind of get away with, you know, our standard 4 and 4 for a, you know, for a test point. And if I remember, I think we didn't find that the Grafana and OpenSearch combination was significantly different from what we had.
No, and I mean even just the OpenSearch, even without Grafana, just the OpenSearch to what the old Esmond stuff used to use, it was pretty similar when we were looking at it. So I mean, part of it is OpenSearch will kind of just use. We have some settings that when you install the toolkit, and actually I think it's even done in the archive package. So even if you have a standalone archive, that we tweak there in terms of it by default. I think it takes like it'll take, so it's a Java, right? So it'll use 50%, I believe, of the available memory for like the maximum heap space. But we cap that at, I believe, 8 gigs. So once you hit like a host has 16 gigs of memory or more, we don't have it take more than that because we don't think it actually
there's just no need
that in most cases. And if it does, at that point, you know, you can tune that yourself, right? We're just trying to figure out semi-sane defaults for people. And that's kind of where we've landed with that. But again, it can kind of depend on your use case and how many tests you're running at it and things like that. And I don't have a good scale of at this point you need to move it. And honestly, in some ways, you kind of have to, at some point, you have to kind of spec that out yourself, and given your own test profile and stuff like that, because there's a lot of variables. Essentially, is what it boils down to. So,
yeah, and I think that sort of goes better. You know, like what we do in Internet 2 is we try to keep the test points as slim as we can. And you know, if it turns out that you have a lot of them and you're going to archive a lot of stuff, the economics of it are probably better, that you're better off just sending them someplace central. And you know, and doing all that stuff there, as opposed to, you know, burning all those watts, running a whole lot of additional OpenSearch and stuff on the test points. So let's see what else is cooking. Kind of inside baseball, I guess. I just finished up I just finished up a revision to the P scheduler server that will give you better better diagnostics when all the hosts, when none of the hosts involved have tools in common. Not only will you get to see what was offered and what was declined, but you'll also get to see why the hosts that declined them said so. So it might be things like you asked for something that's not supported, or a combination of options didn't work out. But that should also help. That should help resolve those, I think, a lot quicker than the way we used to do it previously.
Well, I think we can give it another minute or so to give people to think more questions, but we are getting close to the top of the hour, and there's probably no hard and fast rule. We have to go all the way there if people are satisfied with their questions for the day. I would encourage people to reach out if they have ideas or things they'd like to see at future versions of this call. Because like I said, we're kind of evolving this. We're planning to do it again. Yeah, so we're planning to do it again in about 3 months. I think we mentioned at the beginning, kind of quarterly is our goal. So yeah, if you have any thoughts of things you'd like to see at things like this in the future, please. So my email is andy@es.net. We can probably share those or something in chat, and then invite
or actually better yet, in case one of us gets hit by a bus, perfSONAR-developer@internet2.edu.
Yeah,
to get hold of all of us.
And
by all means, I mean, don't if there's a feature you want, or you have a bug or a security problem or anything else like that, by all means, don't wait until the next one of these. Drop us a line directly, because we can bugs, obviously we can usually fix pretty quickly. So
yeah, I imagine the next one of these should probably time pretty well in terms of 5.1 being a little bit more prevalent out there. So I would imagine that would probably add more questions and things like that. So I think that could be fun, assuming that all lines up nicely.
Yeah, I don't have a good bead on how well. Obviously we'll know when it happens, but I don't have a good bead yet on how long the beta is going to be for 5.1. At least for my corner of the system, we haven't done anything really major to measurement, so I'm not expecting too much trouble with that. So I suspect that a lot of the tinkering that's going to come as a result of that will probably be with the new graphs and stuff, which hopefully will be easy because it'll be more configuration and less code.
Yeah. And hopefully it's more display issues and things like that, because we're at a higher up in the stack this time around. I know 5.0 was pretty disruptive just because it was a big change. So hopefully this is also a pretty big change, but hopefully slightly.
Yeah. What do we go? 6 years between 4.0 and 5.0, I think. Yeah, 4.0 was April of 17, and 5.0 was April of the same day too, wasn't it? It was like
it was
April
the exact same day.
Yeah.
Remember, we were joking that we really kind of missed an opportunity not releasing in a year earlier, because it'd be 5.0 5 years later.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. It was 6.
But so yeah, well, hopefully, and again, I think, and this is, I think we're to the point now where when we the major releases obviously are sort of big architectural changes, and it just so happens that this, the 4.0 series was all about measurement, and this series is all about visualization and things. So hopefully we'll have some more cool things to show. I mean, and hats off, by the way, to ESNet for having developed the Mad Dash work-alike plugin for Grafana. That's actually pretty cool. And
yeah, which if people aren't aware, that's actually an official Grafana plugin. It has been for a little while. So in Grafana, it's basically the thing that looks like Mad Dash. It's a grid. So Katrina Turner here at ESNet, I know some of you know her. She kind of did all the major legwork on that and got that into Grafana, which is cool. So
yep. And if you have stock in the makers of Tums and Tylenol, you should probably sell it, because Andy and I will be consuming a lot less of it. So, all right. Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we can wrap up.
I think so.
So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And if you have, as I said, if you have questions, that can't wait, by all means, drop us a line, and we look forward to doing this again in a few months.
Thanks all.